I probably could have added at least one extra book to this list, but Elden Ring came out a few days ago, and I haven't done anything except play that. It's my life now. I'm so happy. Just before I start, I want to give everyone a quick reminder that I have a Patreon, and the Patreon tiers start as low as $1 a month. If you love what I do, if you think I'm doing a good job, please show your support with Patreon. $1 a month makes a huge difference when a lot of people do it, and I would really, really appreciate your support. Okay, here are the books that I read in February. Starting with Vagabonds by Haojin Fang, translated by Ken Liu. I've talked about this book a lot. I put it in a sci-fi by women list, and I dedicated an entire video to it, so I won't say much here. I also don't have my copy. Vagabonds is one of my new favorite science fiction novels. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of science fiction. However, when I did my video on it, I had like 10 people in the comments tell me that it's similar to The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin. Now, I love Ursula Le Guin. I've read the Earthsea Quartet, and I've read, what's it called? The Left Hand of Darkness. I loved that book, but I haven't read The Dispossessed, so I couldn't comment on that. I will. Vagabonds is a science fiction epic set about 200 years from now, where we have colonized Mars and Earth represent two different forms of political and social and economic philosophy. One is hyper-capitalist, the other is hyper-communist, and they are looking at freedom and what freedom really means and what freedom can look like, and how different people look at other economic situations or social situations or political situations and try to determine the difference between them and what is right, what is wrong, what is free, what is not, etc. It's a really gorgeously realized and well-built world, and I loved Vagabonds. I still think about it every single day. It's such a good book. It's a little bit too long because I don't like long books anymore, and it does kind of waffle and it could have been cut down a little bit, but I still really enjoy the intimate, intricate, detailed world building. Ugh. And the philosophies and themes that it's exploring, obviously. Let's talk about a book that I actually didn't mention in a video, but I added to a few different articles on our blog, and you can go look at those. This is Please Miss by Grace Lavery. I've been saying Lavery, apparently it's Lavery. Grace Lavery is a British-born, US-based academic, professor, clever person. But this is her memoir, kind of, on being transgender. Grace Lavery is a very unshackled and punk trans woman who explores her life as a trans woman, her transition, and a lot of extra other things in amazing situations in this book. It's really hard to talk about. This is why I didn't do a video on it. I had to write it all down. I couldn't describe this book. So it's a trans memoir, but it's also a book of criticism. There's pop culture in here, there's film and literature criticism, there are musings on life, there are letters from a strange stalker person who's maybe being transphobic, maybe not, and they're all included here kind of chapter by chapter. It's a memoir, but it's also kind of like autofiction. It sometimes reads like a stream of consciousness, and other times she turns it into a play or a sitcom skit. It's, in terms of form, outlandish and unshackled, and it plays by no rules but its own. It's a very, very clever book in terms of its form, in terms of its narrative or lack of one, and in terms of the philosophy that it's bringing up and exploring. And it's funny, and it's, I think, very useful for young trans people to read, to see the dirty and grimy and raw and funny aspects of being trans, but then you're also getting very, very clever academia and film and lit criticism and loads of other stuff. I cannot tell you how dense and also funny and also strange and also outlandish and frightening and everything this book is. These are also two new books that I read this month and have done dedicated reviews on each of them. The first is My Pen is the Wing of a Bird. This is a collection of short stories by Afghan women writers. I am very, very taken by this book. I am very excited for it to be out there in the world now, and I really, really need people to read it. When I did my review, I had a lot of people in the comments saying that they were going to go out and buy it, asking me the best place to buy it. If you're outside the UK, order it from Blackwell's. They are a UK bookshop, but they ship internationally, mostly for free, I think. Please pick up this book. This is such an important and beautiful collection of fiction. Afghan women writers right now are, well, to say the least, oppressed and in danger. and the fact that we have a collection of fiction that shines a light on ordinary Afghan life, especially by its women, is so vital and so beautiful. It's also just really good fiction. Some of the stories in here are raw and touching and exquisite. So you're getting a really good collection of short stories by 18 different women, but you're also getting a glimpse into the current state of Afghanistan from the perspective of its women fiction writers. And the other book that I reviewed this month was Cold Enough for Snow by Jessica Au. In my video, I made this whole fuss about the fact that it won a prize, and that prize is described in a ridiculous way, and I still feel that way. I just have a difficult relationship with literary prizes. But Cold Enough for Snow is still a really, really lovely book. It's a tiny, tiny little novella, less than 100 pages long, and those are my favourite books in terms of length and format and structure, and this is a really beautiful novella. It tells the story of a 30-ish-year-old woman who meets up with her mother in Tokyo, where they can go on a little holiday together, and they roam the streets, and they talk about life, and they look at things, and you get a lovely glimpse of Tokyo from the perspective of a tourist who's really interested in its art and culture. But mostly you're getting a look at family dynamics and relationships. You're looking at how our protagonist sees her mother, how she views the concept of motherhood when she's considering becoming a mother, the ties that bind family members throughout generations in history. There's a lot going on here, and the book flits back and forth between her own memories, stories that her mother has told her that she's then relaying to us, and obviously the present day and what she's seeing and doing in Tokyo. And it's just so intricately woven together, the details about this woman and her life and her mother. It's all so laid bare and intricate. It's like opening up a machine and seeing all the cogs. The sheer amount of detail in here is amazing, and it really draws you in. And considering how short it is, it's almost jarring when you finish the book and put it down and realize you were never actually in that world physically. I also read a manga this month, which again I didn't mention in a video, but I've put in a few different manga related articles that we have on our blog that you can go read. I'll link to them in the description. The manga is called Our Dreams at Dusk. It's written and drawn by Yuki Kamatani, and it is a queer manga about a young boy's exploration of his sexual identity. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. I'm considering doing a full video on it. We'll see. There's a really gorgeous YouTube channel that I've been watching recently called Lines in Motion, which is a channel by a fellow non-binary British YouTube person who does a really, really tremendous job of animating their videos. Go watch their video on Our Dreams at Dusk if you want a really intricate and detailed examination of the blend of visuals and narrative and character, because Our Dreams at Dusk beautifully uses visual metaphor and visual representation in its art to convey what its characters are going through, how they're feeling, how they're reacting to things. But Our Dreams at Dusk, as I said, is about a young high school boy who has kind of been outed early by his classmates as gay, and they're all teasing him and bullying him, and he's just about to go kill himself. He just runs up to a cliffside and he's like, I'm just gonna jump. And then he looks over and he sees a young woman do exactly that. Jump out of a window. And he runs over to save her, only to find that she's completely fine. And jumping out of her window is just something she does. But the building that she's in, which he has now discovered, is this drop-in center, which is kind of a community center for social outcasts and people who don't really fit in and people who feel that this is a space where they can be comfortable. And most of them are queer in some way. And as we get to know the characters in the drop-in center through our protagonist, he gets to feel confident in exploring his own sexuality and expressing it. He meets a lesbian couple, he meets a boy, I'm going to say boy, much younger than him, who is trying to figure out whether or not she is in fact trans. Getting the pronouns right when talking about this character is tough because they're going through their own gender crisis at this moment, and our protagonist is going through his own sexual crisis. And it's just about queer people, pretty much, going through different journeys through their life and building relationships with one another, and it's one of the most beautiful, heart-wrenching, gorgeous things I've ever read, and the art, as I said, really amplifies that in terms of its visual metaphor. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about, I'm not really going to talk about in much detail because this is a planned video that I've got going up very soon. These are 5 historical novels by women that I read recently, and I want to dedicate a whole video to all 5 of them, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. One of them, however, is The Manningtree Witches by A.K. Blakemore, and I talked about this recently in its own dedicated video. This is now one of my favourite British novels. I absolutely adored this. 300 pages of gothic, witchy, historical, gritty loveliness. It is stunningly well written. You can tell Blakemore is a poet, first and foremost. This is truly gorgeous language, fantastic, intricate world building of a quiet English village in the 17th century, and most importantly, it is a feminist novel about patriarchy and the power of men over women, power of rich over poor. I've done a whole video on it, you can go check it out, but I really, really loved this book. And the other 4 books that I've got planned for that video, which I read this month, are Matrix by Lauren Groff, which is set in 12th century France controlled Britain, French Empire, I'm not really sure what it was. Anyway, medieval France, Brittany thing. Not Brittany, France, Britain thing. Or is it Brittany? I know so little about everything. It's about the young half-sister of the Queen of France who is exiled to a nunnery in England, and she's of a line of very, very powerful, headstrong women, women of war, women of conquest, and so she decides to kind of take her situation and run with it. And I'll tell you more in the next video, otherwise I'm going to start waffling here. But Matrix is beautifully written, just like The Manningtree Witches. The language is gorgeous, it's stellar. I have some reservations about that, but I also see the beauty in it. And I'm waffling again. I'll tell you more in the next video. Pandora! Pandora is written by Susan Stokes Chapman. This is a review copy. This is another gorgeous piece of historical fiction. I thought it was going to be a Greek retelling, but it's not. It's set in Georgian England, and it is about Greek stuff. It is about Pandora, but the titular Pandora is actually a protagonist whose parents were Indiana Jones types. They were antiquarian / archaeologist people. They died. She gets raised by her uncle, who's a horrible guy, and he has just brought into the shop maybe Pandora's box, and that's all I'll tell you. Again, next video. The Leviathan. Oh my god. So The Leviathan is written by Rosie Andrews and it is a gorgeous, gorgeous piece of gothic historical fiction. This is camp as hell. This is Frankenstein meets the books of Stuart Turton. I loved this book. It is absolutely no holds barred nuts when it comes to how gothic and ham-handed everything is. It's special. This is special. It's ludicrous in terms of its writing and its characters and its plotting and what happens. The first half is a slow build and it's got a kind of build-up of mystery, and then in the second half it basically becomes kind of a schlocky horror movie. It's wild and I loved it. And this is a book I'm currently reading, which is also going to appear in this list once the book is done and if I can ever stop playing Elden Ring. This is The Key and the Lock by Beth Underdown. I've had like 3 people ask me if this is Lock and Key. No, it's not, if you were going to ask that. This book has had loads of praise heaped on it by writers who focus on gothic and historical fiction, and so I pretty much bought it on their recommendations, which isn't something I often do. I did like no research, I saw it in a bookshop and I bought it. And I'm really enjoying it. This is a historical mystery novel. It is a spiritual successor to the themes and setting and ideas all put forth by Daphne du Maurier. It really feels like a modern du Maurier novel. Modern in the sense that it's written now, not that it's set now. This is actually set around World War I, and it also periodically goes back in time even further to the 1880s, and it's about one woman dealing with the death of her son as a soldier in World War I, and also dealing with a death that happened when she was a teenager in 1888. It's really fun. I am not in love with it, but I am enjoying it, and I'll tell you more in my video on all of these 5 books, which will go up in like a week. Okay, that was like 8 books, I think, and a manga. I had a much better month of reading. Like, January was a really terrible month of reading for me. I kept starting and stopping books, and I just wasn't having much fun. These books were all great in their own way. I had a lot of fun reading all of these, and my thoughts are just spiraling when it comes to some of them. It's been a really fun month. Once again, if you can support me on Patreon with $1 a month, I would really appreciate it. If you think I'm doing a good job, show me some love and subscribe for books.